Looks like our fears have been confirmed. Miami's top wide receiver. I don't think we're going to see him against Texas A&M. So who needs to step up?
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
One day away, my friends. One day from Texas A&M. I am Alex Donno, your host. I'm a University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and contributor to allhurricanes.com. And thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. This episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. So, unfortunately, we talked about the reports and the rumors yesterday. Seemingly has been confirmed. Xavier Restrepo. Don't think we're going to see him Saturday against Texas A&M. A Miami Herald report, courtesy of Susan Miller-Degnan, and others are reporting this. Restrepo has a foot injury, could be out for several weeks. First thing, guys, and the most important thing, we wish this young man the best, right? This is someone who is chasing his dreams, living his dream, playing big-time college football at a high level. And if he is indeed going to be out for a while here, it's tough, man. It's really, really tough. Anytime we talk about guys in recent years who have had serious injuries, Luke Chaney, we've talked about it, and he's got another issue he's dealing with, all that Al Blades Jr. has been through. Now we see Xavier going through a tough time. We wish you the best, and we wish you a speedy recovery. From a football standpoint, yeah, Restrepo's going to be missed, guys, a lot, okay? So far this season, 11 of Tyler Van Dyke's 33 completions have gone to Restrepo, 33%. I was not a math major, but I figured that out still. 12 targets out of 45 Tyler Van Dyke passing attempts, that's 27%. I had some help with that one. Have gone to Xavier Restrepo. Credit to Jake Marcus for that stat, by the way. 12 targets out of 45. Xavier Restrepo has been the go-to guy, so you know what this means. Next man up. This is going to provide a huge opportunity, not only for Brashard Smith, who's the one who's going to be taking his place in the starting lineup, but really for the entire wide receiver core to step up and contribute, because Tyler Van Dyke clearly, TVD has felt most comfortable to this point targeting X. So now Tyler is going to be forced to spread the football around even more. So it's not only up to Brashard to fill that void in the slot, but it's definitely up to Keyshawn Smith. I'm not forgetting about Jacolby George, who's coming back from suspension this week. Michael Redding, who's had a nice start to the year. Romello Brinson. We want to see more awesome stuff from Romello. Can my guy Colby Young get into the action? Like, there's so many opportunities here. So let's sort this all out. Very, very good friend of the show. We love when he joins us on Fridays. Contributor to allhurricanes.com. Much like myself, this guy works a lot harder than I do. Luke Chaney joins us. Luke, how you doing, sir?
Good, man. How's it going? It's a pleasure to be back on.
It's a pleasure having you. So, okay, like first, before we talk about who needs to fill that void, let's talk about that void, Luke, because I mean, your takeaways so far on Xavier Restrepo and just how big he's been for this offense.
It's a loss. It's definitely complicates things heading into Texas A&M. Restrepo and Tyler Van Dyke obviously have a very great chemistry. They're roommates, and that kind of off-field chemistry that they have is just friends, really carries onto the field. Restrepo is the security blanket for Van Dyke. He was the player that, at least for the first two games of the season, Van Dyke really turned to in the passing game. As you mentioned, 33% of his completions went to Restrepo. Just a testament to the bond they have on the field, and a bond that likely won't be there for several weeks. So it leaves a void, and it leaves a lack of production in that receiving room because there's not a lot of it, from the players that you mentioned, but it definitely provides an opportunity for Keyshawn Smith, Jacolby George, Romello Brinson, Brashard Smith, these type of guys to, really step up and to prove themselves in Restrepo's absence.
And the timing obviously is very unfortunate. Just a couple days before Miami heads into College Station to face Texas A&M, which is, I don't care what happened to them last week. This is not going to be an easy game, and there's a reason why Miami are underdogs in this game because of that talent on the field. A couple of cool comments here we got from YouTube. And listen, our viewers and our listeners, I love you guys so much. Like so many of you, first of all, a lot of you are very, very smart when it comes to football and Miami history and all that. But I love the positivity that a lot of you bring. We got a great comment from Willie on our YouTube channel. He says, Brashard is to Restrepo what Garcia is to Tyler Van Dyke. I don't expect much of a drop off. I like that. And another great comment from Gary, who says, we will be all right. When Nyjaliek King got hurt, that's how we discovered Tyler Van Dyke. So, okay, Luke, let's talk about the opportunities. First, hear from Brashard Smith. Hopefully he and Tyler Van Dyke can develop or reinforce that chemistry really quickly, because I agree with what Willie said. Like, Brashard Smith is, I think he can be every bit the player that Xavier Restrepo is.
Yeah, Brashard Smith and Xavier Restrepo are different players in what they can and cannot do. Restrepo is a higher floor player, more consistent production. You know what you're going to get from him. Very solid route runner, does all the little things right. Very Braxton Berrios like in the way that Restrepo plays. With Brashard Smith, you get a different skill set. While they both play in the slot, they both line up at similar positions. Brashard is someone that can impact the game in more ways than just those routes that Restrepo ran. And this isn't to slight Xavier at all. He's Miami's best and most consistent receiver. But with Brashard, you have some versatility there. You can use him in the run game. You can use him out wide. We even saw against Southern Miss, he had that great jump ball on that, I think it was a third down pass from Van Dyke. That was like 25, 30 yards downfield. He's talented. He is very, very, very talented. And he kind of had that coming out game last week against Southern Miss. When Restrepo was off the field, Brashard really came into that slot role and just stepped up. So we'll see what happens. One thing that was a problem with Brashard Smith heading into this fall were some drop concerns with him, but I think that was really leveled off. I didn't really notice many drops, if any, in fall, and we haven't seen that at all, so far through the season. It will provide an opportunity for him. Brashard Smith will get a majority of those reps in the slot. I expect him to start, and he very well could make the most of it because he is a very, very talented player.
Miami for the past couple of weeks have been without Jacolby George, who didn't have a whole lot of catches last year, but he averaged 26.2 yards per catch last season. So this guy can be a deep ball threat, a big play threat. Won't be an easy matchup because one of the strengths of Texas A&M is their defensive backfield. So just for any of Miami's receivers, creating separation won't be easy. But Jacolby George, I'd figure, Luke, he's got to be real hungry. Like, do you expect him to get a lot of burn, like 0 to 60 from being suspended to being like a 30-40 snap guy? Or do you think maybe they'll use him sparingly?
I think that if you were to ask me that before the news about Restrepo, I probably would have said more sparingly. But I think with that news in mind, I think it calls for more desperation. Someone's got to fill that void. And while I mentioned Brashard Smith, there's got to be other guys who do so. Jacolby George is my favorite receiver on the team. He has the highest ceiling. I've mentioned that time and time again before, how he was that potential number one guy in spring and in fall. It's uncommon for a player, or at least a non-proven player who was suspended, to just go into the starting lineup and just immediately start performing. So I don't think we'll necessarily see Jacolby as a starter, especially when the staff has really liked what they've seen from Michael Redding, who's really stepped up in his place. But, with the news about Restrepo being hurt, and with the talent in A&M's backfield and defensive backfield, just to kind of talk about them real quick. A lot of press coverage. They man up. Miami will have to create separation. The receivers are good to have to create separation. Just a couple guys to mention: freshman Denver Harris, sophomore Tyreek Chappelle. Chappelle was a all ACE or all SEC freshman player last year. Super talented guy, and then obviously their defensive backfield capped off by Antonio Johnson, All American player last year. There's a lot of talent there, and I'm sure that they're going to recognize that, hey, Miami's receivers and Miami's outside receivers haven't looked great so far, especially when creating separation, when creating, those routes on their own. So having someone like Jacolby George, someone who is a very fluid route runner, someone who can create separation, and having him perform and play up to his level, is going to be huge for Miami. So I guess, and a long way of answering what should be a much shorter question. Yes, I do expect Jacolby George to play. I don't think he'll be a starter, but I do expect him to play a lot of reps. I do expect him to play well.
Yeah, and I wanted to specifically talk about wide receivers first, but I know that there's people listening to this right now, like screaming, like, "What about the tight ends? What about the running backs catching balls?" Oh, absolutely. I think that that's got to be a big part of the game plan. And Miami's tight end room so far has been a little bit disappointing with the production in the passing game. I mean, Will Mallory didn't have a single catch last week. There was just one catch for 5 yards out of the entire position group last week. That was Elijah Arroyo for 5. And yeah, listen, we know catching balls out of the backfield. We've already seen Henry Parrish do a lot of that. And I hope this can be a rooster game, because when it comes to him catching passes out of the backfield, that guy can potentially take it to the house if he can find a little bit of space. So do you think now, even more so with Restrepo out, that the tight ends and running backs have to be relied on even more in the passing game?
They're going to have to, man, especially the tight ends, because I think we will see some of the receiving production from the running backs take a little bit of a hit, just because, on these passing downs and on third downs, I expect Miami to kind of contain these running backs and kind of use them more in pass protection, which is why I think we'll see a lot of that Franklin on Saturday. And for that reason, because he is Miami's best pass protector as a running back. But yeah, the Titans need to get more involved in multiple ways. I mean, we see a lot of 2 tight end sets. We see a lot of 12 personnel. I mean, we see these tight ends, especially Will Mallory, being used in a multitude of different ways. Mallory's used as an inline tight end, as a slot, as sometimes on the outside. They're going to need to get these tight ends involved, and I think they will, just because something that I noticed against Appalachian State, that the Mountaineers did very well, and I think it's a way to attack Texas A&M, is that they're a little bit undisciplined on the defense side of the football, a little undisciplined in that, some of these play action rollouts, maybe motioning the tight end pre-snap, post-snap, on these little, flat routes, have them, run up field, get those yards after catch. Because like I said, the linebackers, they tend to bite on those play actions. So that's one way to get the tight ends involved. And I think they will, just because, with the void of Restrepo, not only will, as you mentioned, will the receivers have to step up, but the tight ends will have to as well. And I think they will. I think that Gaddis will really try to get the tight ends involved on Saturday.
When we come back, we're going to talk about the Texas A&M quarterback situation, because reports say they're going to be making a change. So how could this help and how could this hurt Miami? Because if they're going from Haynes King to Max Johnson, very, very different types of quarterbacks, I guess it's just another thing for Kevin Steele to think about here. We'll also have some keys to the game when we come back. Guys, betonline.net. It's your number one source for all your pro and college football betting needs and sports info this year. Find all the latest football league developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts, including this year's games, week 3 coming up, including Miami's game. Miami, 6-point underdogs now. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering info, including live betting, esports, and scores. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your favorite sports and events, including Major League Baseball, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to their website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. Available free wherever you get your podcast, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So reports, Luke, and this seems like the right move to me, that Texas A&M and Jimbo Fisher could be making a starting quarterback change from Haynes King, who's been bad the first 2 games, to LSU transfer Max Johnson, who I think is Mark Richt's nephew. I know there's some kind of a blood relative situation there between a former Miami head coach and this quarterback, Max Johnson. And so, okay, this, Kevin Steele did say it this week that whatever quarterback plays or whatever combination of quarterbacks plays doesn't really change their preparation because Jimbo Fisher's offense is his offense. It hasn't changed in decades, a few nuances here and there. So I don't think necessarily they're having headaches in the film room about this, but it's definitely going to be a different look because the way I see it, Luke, is, Haynes King really been struggling as a passer, but we've seen mobile, quick quarterbacks hurt Miami in the past. Haynes King is fast. He's a risk to break, contain, make you pay. Max Johnson, he's a statue, right? I mean, I think he's a better passer than Haynes King, but he's a statue. So I don't know. Do you see this? How worried are you for Miami? Do you think this change is going to be a big help or not that big of a help for Texas A&M?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head when, evaluating both players. It's kind of funny last night. So I also want to give a quick shout out just because the publication that broke the news about Johnson, the Battalion Student Run newspaper. So that's a point for student media there. Good for them. Yeah, there we go. But yeah, Max Johnson does have a much different skill set than Haynes King. I was doing some last minute prep last night when I heard this news. I was able to find some film on Johnson, and he does a lot of the things well that King fails to do well. Some things I like about Johnson. She has a strong arm. He doesn't have a rocky, doesn't have a cannon. He doesn't have like a Justin Herbert, Josh Allen type arm, but he has a strong enough arm for it to be considered a strength. He shows some really nice zip, especially while throwing down the middle of the field. He makes quick, confident reads. He can throw a little bit off platform just given his arm talent. Very quick release, and he is a lefty, so there are some differences there.
Yeah, that's right.
When game planning against him, but his weaknesses all of his weaknesses do kind of stem towards his lack of mobility. He is 6'5". He's more of a prototypical pro style, stand in the pocket, navigates your defense. He's more of a surgical guy, but he's not going to make plays outside the pocket. And one thing that I noticed is that when the rush is able to get to him and when his pocket starts to collapse, his mechanics, especially his lower base, really starts to buckle down a little bit. He tends to get a little frazzled. His awareness, when there's pressure from the weak side, when there's that backside pressure, is non-existent at times, which creates opportunities for to send these DB blitzes, to send free rushers to his backside and potentially create some fumbles, some turnover opportunities, just because he does have a very hard time navigating this pressure. And you do see quite a drop off in his arm strength when he is dealing with pressure, and when he when you are able to get him a little frazzled, he does tend to throw some floaters, some potential turnover worthy passes. When Max Johnson has a clean pocket, and when he's hitting these slant routes, these out routes, like I mentioned, making quick, confident reads, he's a very good quarterback. But he was the backup this season for a reason. Struggles with pressure. Where Haynes King did excel outside the pocket, Johnson does struggle. So there's that. Just a different skill set. I know some Miami fans are going to be worried, given, seeing Johnson's stat line last year. I think he had 27 touchdowns, 6 picks last season for LSU. He was pretty good, but he does have his weaknesses as a quarterback, and he is exploitable in a lot of different areas of his game.
Well, and that's exactly why, for everything Luke just said, my first key to the game is pass rush needs to provide constant pressure here because that could be the Achilles heel for Max Johnson and the LSU offense. And listen, we know who needs to step up. Leonard Taylor needs to pick up where he left off last week. Akheem Mesidor is back. I want to see Nyjaliek Kelly build from his first career sack last year, and that rotation is going to keep legs fresh. Just stay in Max Johnson's grill. My second key to the game, Luke, and I've already talked about it a couple times this week. So for people who listen to and watch Locked On Canes, you already know this, but do not take special teams for granted this week. As I know the Canes won't, but as a fan, do not take it for granted, right? And it's not only kick returns, punt returns, coverage, but just the kicking game in itself. I believe Miami has the best punter in the country, okay? Andy Borregales has himself a leg, right? Every time this guy kicks off, it's a touchback, which is so important. You take those return opportunities away. He's looked a lot more confident in his field goal kicking so far this season. Like, this is the type of game, Luke, where hidden yards from special teams, right? Like, you get a couple of really nice punts after playing the field position game. I know it's not sexy or exciting to talk about, but that can be the difference in winning or losing a game like this.
Yeah, I think Miami definitely has the edge when it comes to special teams. You mentioned Lou Hedley, Andy Borregales, just two of the best, if not the best, at their respective positions. And also, in kick coverage, and kick returns, Miami's looked very good so far. In special teams, they have looked very nice, and you can say the same for a team like Texas A&M, because they do have some struggles with kicking field goals. They are an explosive team on kickoff returns just because Devon A-Chain is one of the fastest players and one of the most explosive players, not only in the SEC but in the country. But I think Miami does really have an edge there when it comes to special teams. One thing that I'm looking for, or one key rather for this game, I think, is that you have to test A&M's run defense outside the tackles.
Yes.
Something that App State did very, very well was mixing in their different blocking schemes and running a lot of outside zone and wide zone and kind of forcing these A&M linebackers to, defend horizontally, which created a lot of backside play action opportunities the other way, as I alluded to earlier. If you haven't watched that App State Texas A&M game, please do, because App State only scored 17 points, but that doesn't tell the tale of the story at all. It was a masterful offensive game plan. And I think Gaddis, of course, he's been watching that film. Of course, he's been seeing how to exploit A&M. And you have to take advantage of their undisciplined play style because there's a lot of talent in that defense. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. A lot of talent in that D-line, talented linebackers, and a boatload of talent in the defensive backfield. But they play undisciplined. They take bad angles at times. They over pursue. They take bad angles. And it's just, you can exploit it. A team like App State was able to exploit it, and I expect a team like Miami, a team that is more talented than an App State, to exploit it as well.
No, I think that's perfectly said, and it's why my third key was establish a run. I thought you made a great point with the outside running game, and hopefully, but you made a couple of good points that where I'm hoping this can be the type of game where Jalen Knighton can take over and break some big plays out of the running game. But I also, like you, I expect Thad Franklin to be on the field more than people expect because of his abilities in pass protection. But then, Henry Pitt, Miami really does have a 1-2-3 punch at running back, right? Especially if Rooster really is 100% now, as coach says he is, because Henry Parrish, who knows the Aggies defense very well, he, Ole Miss beat them last year, and Parrish averaged 6.4 yards per carry against their defense last year. So he's got some positive history against the Texas A&M D. So that's a huge one. And when we come back, we want to take a look at some of the odds for this game. The line has moved over the last couple of days. I wonder if Xavier Restrepo had anything to do with that, and plus the Texas A&M quarterback switch, because we have seen a half a point of movement, I believe, since yesterday, as of looking at the line this morning. And then with how low scoring Texas A&M's game was last week, I wonder what to do with this over under. We're going to talk about some of the Bet Online numbers when we come back. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. Guys, you want to make sure you're checking out Bet Online. They have you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Bet Online, where the game starts. So I'm taking a look, Luke. Miami was a 5.5-point underdog, plus 5.5 for most of the week. I check it this morning at Bet Online. It's now at 6. Okay. Now, that's good news for Miami fans. So some of you are like, why are they disrespecting us and moving the line? No, if you want to bet on Miami, that's great news, because 6 is a way better number than 5.5, because 6 is a pretty common point differential in a game. So that's the difference between losing your bet or pushing your bet. So you should be happy if you're a Miami fan. You want to bet Miami that they're now 6-point underdogs. And full disclosure, Luke, I am very hesitant to bet in games this big that involve my team, but I do think it's going to be really close. I think this game will be one way or the other decided by probably less than 6 points. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that this is gonna be a close game. I think it's going to be a one-score game either way. Just given Texas A&M struggles they've had in offense, I think it's gonna be low scoring. I don't expect either team to really push 30 at all. So I guess in regards to that over under,
It's 45, by the way, the over under.
45. Okay,
45.
I would probably take the under.
Me
Uh,
too.
I would take the under. Well, okay, my score prediction 23-17 Miami. Yeah, I've gone back and forth in this game quite a bit. But I just see Texas A&M struggles on offense, and I just have a hard time picking them no matter who the quarterback is. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned the line shift from 6 to, or from 5.5 to 6. For Miami fans that want to get in on this, probably the time to do so before there's any last minute line change there, because 6 is a much better, or a much safer, I would say, point total, or spread to bet on.
And I will say this, for the Miami fans out there who you think the Canes are going to win the game outright, the money line is tasty for you. Miami plus 195. So if you think the Canes are just going to go in there and win the game, forget about the spreads, they go in there and win the game, you'd get $195 back in addition to your bet on a $100 bet. So that's definitely something to think about. I was looking through some of the props, Luke, and I think one prop that I found to be very interesting, the longest touchdown scored in the game by either team, and that could be, a kick return, it could be a long pass, long run, whatever. The longest touchdown over or under 54.5 yards. I'm tempted to take the over on this only because there's so much speed on both sides. You feel like somebody might break something, whether it's A-Chain on the Texas A&M side, or, hopefully Jalen Knighton or Smith, Keyshawn Smith, or Brashard Smith, or Jacolby George, that there's so much speed and talent on both of these teams, and very talented receivers at Texas A&M as well, that maybe somebody, even if there's not a whole lot of points scored, maybe there's one big play in the game.
Is that longest touchdown or longest play?
Longest touchdown.
Ooh, longest touchdown.
Yeah.
When you mentioned that, I just try to picture, I guess, what would be the longest score in my head.
Yeah.
I would probably take the under on that.
Okay.
I would probably take the under, but that could change with a quarterback like Max Johnson, who tends to, test defenses more down the field. So we'll see about that. But yeah, I would probably go the under. If I were to make a prediction of what the longest play would be, I'll say Van Dyke downfield pass to Keyshawn, touchdown, 45 yards.
I like that. All right, so that would be under, but that'd still be a big play. It would still be a very big play.
I think Miami fans would enjoy that type of play.
Well, I think Miami fans will definitely enjoy Luke's work, so make sure you check it out. allhurricanes.com. That's the Sports Illustrated Miami page, and also the Miami Hurricane, the awesome student newspaper there. And hey, there's student papers breaking news out there. It happened with Texas A&M, so make sure you keep it locked to that, and follow this man on Twitter at Luke_Chaney4. So thanks again to Bet Online for all the numbers. Bet Online, where the game starts. And guys, make sure you get more on the ACC by making Locked On ACC your second listen every day. Host Candace Cooper and the local experts of Locked On. Like, hey, I'm a local expert now. I'm on the show every Thursdays, which is awesome. We take you across the ACC in 30 minutes. Make Locked On ACC your second listen. Thanks for making us your first. We will talk to you guys tomorrow. We're going to do a kind of a final pregame before the big game tomorrow. Miami at Texas A&M, 9 p.m. We will talk to you again tomorrow on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.